in so many ways, more than any other therapy, to work with couples to know exactly what we're targeting and what the antidotes are in terms of what the couple needs. And so often when a couple is coming into our offices, the thing that they're coming in with is some type of extreme injury that has occurred in the relationship. We can say attachment injury, a schema injury, especially if one of the partners is very sensitive to abandonment, to mistrust, abuse, to emotional deprivation or defectiveness. When the schema is already there in a pretty strong or severe way, that's going to be so painful, above and beyond even what a normal injury would be. And that's where we do have the tools to be able to work with couples that are even in the most stressed and difficult situations. Let me put the timer on just to make sure we get this right. Good. So I will use a couple of slides just to give you a framework as I'm talking. So what's a schema injury in particular? Just to have it in your minds. It's not just a small injury. It's something that you're in the session and over again it's coming up. And sometimes it may seem that it's coming up out of the blue. One partner goes right back to that place and it comes up again and again and again. And the other partner is thinking to themselves, well, that happened 16 years ago. Why are you still bringing that up? There's a reason. It's because the brain hasn't forgotten. The brain hasn't forgotten the hurt or the pain. And again, especially when there already is an injury there, it's going to go into that alert status. And everything that happened during that injury probably reinforced the schema that was already there. Abandonment, like we were saying before, this belief that at any point my partner is going to leave me, which can tie into defectiveness. Right? He or she is going to leave me for someone better. I'm not good enough. Deprivation, well, he or she really doesn't understand, and when that deprivation is there, it's going to make it doubly hard to repair and to heal the injury itself. What are some common symptoms of injuries? Well, in a sense, in some ways maybe you have to kind of go through this to fully understand, but it's kind of when your world turns upside down. Especially when there's a discovery of some type of injury. Probably some of the worst ones would be affairs. It doesn't have to be an affair, though. It could be a time when, for instance, I needed to go to the hospital. It seemed like something very severe was happening, and my partner or spouse wasn't there for me. They left me alone in the hospital room with all the doctors surrounding me. I felt completely abandoned. And then my brain goes to this place of how can I possibly trust you again to be there for me? Common emotions, intense is the thing. That's what you're going to see in the office. Intense fear, helplessness is what's coming up. Hurt, sadness, and then shame, right? In some way the mind is thinking, maybe it's me. Maybe there's something about me that led to this. Or for the person who did the injuring, they can also go into an intense shame place, which in couples therapy makes it very difficult because if I'm going into a shame place, I'm not going to show up. I'm not going to be there for the other partner as they're expressing the hurt and the pain. And then they feel alone and abandoned again in our office, which of course is the last thing we want to do. So we have this problem. This is what we know about also with the mistrust abuse schema. We have this problem where the attachment circuit and the survival circuit all of a sudden come into conflict. So that attachment that we need to survive, having that primary attachment figure, all of a sudden becomes a danger to our survival. That's what it feels like inside, which is why so often when couples are coming in with these injuries, the emotions that they're expressing can be so intense. And you'll see it almost like it's a rumination in a way. How could you do that? How could you do that to me? How could you hurt me like that? Weren't you thinking of me? Where was I in your mind at that moment? And then, of course, they can go into this compensation place where they're wanting to know everything. Tell me everything, every moment. I want to know everything that happened. And then you'll notice as a therapist when that's happening and the partner who maybe did the injuring is trying to explain, well, it wasn't that bad. I was delayed at work. There was no way I could get to the hospital. I did try. I texted you. It's not quite enough though, right? And the anxiety doesn't subside unless we have some type of structure to give them that can help them. So that cue that goes off in the mind, that alarm that's there that's causing or bringing up all of the anxiety is saying one key thing: never again. Never again. I'm never going to be in that place again where I'm hurt like that, where I'm that vulnerable. I can't let that happen again. And this is where the relationship is really challenged at the core. Do we have enough of a connection to weather this and to work through this? And so often, unfortunately, what a couple will do is not deal with it, unless it's an affair that's screaming in the face, for instance. But again, there are so many other times when an injury can occur where the injured partner just kind of holds it in. And then it goes on and on and on. It can last for 20 years. But that's 20 years of, again, in the mind thinking, never again. I'm never going to get that close to you or depend that much on you. I'm not going to let it happen. So hopefully they'll come in sooner rather than later so that we can work on that reconnection, which, again, schema therapy does offer. Intense emotional stress, that's a common time for an injury to occur. Birth of a baby, for instance. I bring the baby home, and then I feel all alone. My partner isn't there for me. So often one of the partners, usually it's the man in a male-female relationship, will go through emotional deprivation. They'll be feeling the deprivation themselves because all of a sudden there's this new baby in the household. And then they start going off and doing things more with their friends. They start going golfing more, doing things like that, not realizing the effect or the impact that it's having on the spouse as she's feeling all alone. Those are common. And then, of course, miscarriages in studies, that's a real common thing as well. The male oftentimes not understanding the degree or the depth of the pain and the loss that occurs during a miscarriage so many times. And then maybe they also, if they have some schemas, don't realize that they could actually talk about it, that they could describe what they're experiencing to their partner, which would make it so much easier for the partner who did the injury to understand and to take that in. But of course, they're coming to us partly because they have some ineffective ways of coping when they're upset. They hold it in or they get really, really upset, which of course, how can you hear someone who's screaming at the top of their lungs at you that something's wrong with you? It's very hard. If I start to go into shame, I'm not going to listen to you. I can't take that in. So modes inflicting injuries. What's happening, mates often don't realize because they don't know how to respond in that moment, in that key moment when the other partner is really needing them. They don't know how to respond. For instance, an attached protector, when they get overstimulated, when they're having all these intense emotions coming up, they don't know how to regulate themselves and calm themselves down so that they can turn to their partner and be there for him or her. They just don't know how. So it's not that they're necessarily maliciously trying to hurt the other partner. It happens because it's their style, it's what they're used to, it's their strategy to deal with their vulnerable child. They just don't realize it. Often that's the case. Not always, of course. It could also be if it's more a narcissistic person or a client, if they have that schema, they're just not thinking about the other partner literally, and those are the most difficult cases. Mates may often feel unloved and unable to reach each other for acceptance instead of effectively addressing what's going on. So again, they don't have the language. They never have the model for how to talk through things in their primary relationships growing up. Good chance of that. And so when something like this happens and kind of puts the whole relationship into turmoil, they don't know what to do. So again, here comes schema therapy with some goals. What's our first goal? We want to get to forgiveness, but forgiveness is not the end goal. It's a starting point. It's a starting point to get to forgiveness. Our bigger goal is to give them a structure, to actually change their prototypical cycle, to change how they interact about things in general. We can do that, even in a situation like this where it can be so difficult. The injured partner needs to know that the injuring partner has a felt sense of the hurt and the pain that they experienced. They need to know that, and they can do that only they're not being put into shame. So for instance, if the therapist happens to go into a punitive parent mode themselves, maybe the therapist has kind of a sensitivity themselves because their father or their mother had an affair and they know what it's like, and maybe it's not integrated for the therapist, they could easily say, well, John, do you see what you did to Mary? I mean, did you see how much you hurt her? You should be ashamed of yourself. Well, what's that partner going to do? Maybe not run out of the office immediately, but maybe, or attack you personally. But the thing is, they're going to be pushed into shame, and they're not going to be available for their partner. And that's one of our biggest challenges as a couples therapist when we're in that session. We want to help in any way that we can to keep both partners emotionally present and emotionally available. Again, because the injured partner needs to know that that partner or spouse is staying with them through that. And I need to be able to predict in a positive way. This is the end goal. If I'm the injured partner, I can predict in a positive way that when I'm in need again, my mate, my spouse, my partner is going to be there for me. I need to know that deep down inside. We can get there. We can get there through a process of healing. So one of the best ways of doing it, it's not the only way, but it could be through mode dialogues. So as a therapist, you want to have this structure in your mind of what you're trying to do, what you're trying to set up in these mode dialogues. You can do this through imagery. You can do it when they're looking at each other together, sitting across from each other. If you're doing it both ways at different times, that's great, because as most of you who are couples therapists know, this is not 1 or 2 sessions. This is working through session after session to try and make sense of what happened, to develop a new narrative, to understand this is how we kind of got into this place, and this is how we can make sure it never happens again. So the injured partner accesses the vulnerable child and is able to describe the hurt, the pain, the fear, the sense of helplessness, the shame if I feel defective. They're able to access that vulnerable child and to describe how they're experiencing that to the partner in front of them. And as they're doing that, the impact of that injury is described in detail. And there's some key words we're thinking of. It's coherent, it's clear. Because so often in the start when they're coming in, it's all over the place. They're scrambled. They're not making sense because their mind is going in that rumination place. They're having so much anxiety and so much fear. So what we're doing is we're helping them as a therapist to ground them, to give them a clear language for what they're experiencing. And as they continue, the injuring partner, supported by the therapist needs to step in a lot. He or she needs to step in a lot to really help the partner who did the injuring to really take in the significance, the impact of the injury on their partner, not to dismiss it. If they dismiss it, which so often will be the case with a detached protector, or even an angry child could get critical if that's coming up. When that happens, in a way, it's just reinforcing the pain of the injury. So we want to step in very quickly and do the reparenting part that a schema therapist can do to help reframe where the discussion is going to go. And that injuring partner will see over time, when it's done differently, the injured partner can actually get to a place where they can calm down, where they can talk clearly about what they're experiencing, and when the injured partner is not feeling like they're being bombarded or attacked, so they don't have to put their wall up. Does that make sense so far? The second part of the mode dialogue in terms of a frame, and by the way, if you want a copy of these slides, I can email them to you, or perhaps we could talk to George and get them up on the website as well. So it's really good to have this framework that you can use, 5 minutes, that you can use for yourselves. What the therapist is doing after that is really helping the couple frame the injury within their prototypical cycle. What is their cycle? It's so rare in all the research, we know this, it's so rare that an affair or an injury would just happen. More likely than not, it's the result of a pattern where the couple is disconnecting over time. So they get to a place where they're missing each other. They don't know how to connect on a deeper level. usually it's pretty easy in the beginning, those first few months where you can do no wrong. But then when these key moments happen, like I was talking about, these vulnerabilities, that's when the unhealthy maladaptive modes, schemas come into play. So the therapist really wants to help the couple understand, hey, this is bigger than what you're seeing right now. This is part of a pattern. And of course, why is that so crucial for the couple to know? They need to be able to make sense of what happened, more than just, my partner is a selfish bastard. Well, maybe your partner is a selfish bastard, but that's not the reason necessarily that this was happening, hopefully. And maybe if we could work with the partner to open up and not be defensive or not be in that shame place, they could actually take in the pain that you're experiencing. So the therapist in these dialogues is working on developing a coherent narrative through the healthy adult. That's where the healthy adult comes in and is able to make sense of what was happening, the loss, the hurt, the pain, the regret, the remorse, so that eventually the couple themselves are coming in and saying that same kind of story, that the injured partner can ask for comfort directly and clearly. Again, this may seem simple and obvious, but it's so hard for a person to do when they have these maladaptive coping strategies. They're doing everything they can actually to push the partner away, and this is tested the most when we're talking about an injury. So what the couple is able to do over time in work with schema therapy is construct a coherent narrative of the injury to truly be able to make sense of it, how their cycle is changing through this process of the mode dialogue. The key thing that the mode dialogue does is it teaches them a new way of interacting, that they can feel hurt, they can feel upset. Conflict is going to happen, of course, in all relationships, but they can process that in a very different way. They can connect instead of disconnect, which then can give them the confidence that they need to know that the injury is not going to occur in the future. Again, I need to know that I'm never going to be in that place again. And then quickly, the last part is thinking in terms of strategy, what you're doing in these dialogues, specifically with a partner or a couple who has the schema itself already that's being reinforced. What do we want to do if a person has a mistrust abuse schema? As you can imagine, that's going to be the most difficult to work with when there's an injury that has occurred in the relationship, because the person kind of says, I knew it was going to happen. It was, it's eventual in all relationships, right? They really believe that. So you're going to have probably a lot of extra work to do to realize that, hey, there was an injury that occurred, but it doesn't mean that it always has to be that way. And because you've been working to do it differently in terms of talking through things differently, you can get to a place where you can actually trust, which would be a fantastic place, of course. Abandonment, if I'm always expecting that my partner is going to leave me, it's so easy for that to get connected with defectiveness. I'm not good enough, I'm not lovable, I'm not desirable, so of course you found someone else. Well, I want to get to a place where I can really know deep down inside that my partner does desire me and does love me, which is a lot easier if I'm coping with distress by reaching for my partner and inviting him or her into my pain, as opposed to coming at them, right, with a hatchet, which I can often do when I'm in a really unhealthy place. So controlling behavior diminishes and shifts to a place where I can be inviting, like we're saying. And the last two core schemas that we're targeting, emotional deprivation. When we're doing these dialogues, the couples can actually experience that felt feeling is, instead of deprivation, being nurtured, being cared for, being protected by the other partner. I know that you can feel what I'm feeling. I know that you can tune into me, that you can understand me, that you can resonate with what I'm feeling, and therefore I can get to a place where I can trust you. And finally, defectiveness. The fact that my partner is sitting here beside me in this therapist's office, right, is a huge testament to a good probability that he or she must actually really love me. Going through this where he or she is asked to really feel my pain And to actually experience that can really be a lot of evidence to support the fact that I am lovable, that I deserve praise, and the therapist is guiding and working with both clients to make sure that every day they're doing things with each other to show love, to show compassion, to show kindness. That's what they need, and that's how we as schema therapists can guide a couple who has been through even the most severe of injuries to actually reconnect, so that we don't have to kind of go, well, what do you do when a couple, they're in this terrible place like Chira was talking about? You actually give them a tool, a way, an effective path to bring them back together. Very exciting process, and it works. That's the best part of all. Thank you.